Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our 7-star Terra raid build videos. Just a little bit ago, a little bit earlier today, the Pokemon Company announced what our next our next 7-star raid is going to be, and that is going to be Metagross. Of course, Metagross is a very, very powerful Pokemon, one of my personal favorite pseudo-legendaries. Probably my top favorite, if I'm being honest. Of course, Metagross is a Steel Psychic Pokemon, a very interesting type. It's kind of difficult to deal with. Those hit offensively a lot of different types. Terror type is going to be Steel, so its Steel moves are going to be hitting even harder than normal, which is very scary off of Metagross's notoriously high physical attack stat. Metagross' signature move. Let's get into his moves right off the bat, right? Not much to talk about there. He's Steel Psychic, Terrestrialized Steel type. When it comes to his moves, Meteor Mash is Metagross' signature move. I think almost 100% sure he's going to be running Meteor Mash. It'd be weird if they don't because of how iconic that move is on Metagross. Zen Headbutt is Metagross' best physical psychic move, and I think they're really going to prioritize physical attack. Because even though Metagross does have a respectable special attack, its physical attack is so dominant in its stat spread that I think they're going to go for that. Of course, if they choose to do a mixed attack or psychic would work too. Zen Headbutt is probably what they're going to do, though. Ice Punch and Thunder Punch are two great coverage options that this Pokemon gets that cover a few of its weaknesses, which is very nice. It also gets Stone Edge and Earthquake, another good set of offensive moves for coverage. Bullet Punch, I could see it running. Metagross kind of pretty popularly runs Bullet Punch. I don't really know if they'd run it on a raid build because there's not really a reason for it to. Speed isn't like super useful in these Terra raids, so it'd be kind of weird for them to run a priority move. But Metagross has that move a lot, so I thought I'd throw it up there just in case. Shadow Claw is another great coverage option. Body Press uses Metagross's pretty high physical defense as well. Deal some fighting type damage, which you can also deal with Brick Break, which can destroy some screens, which hopefully it doesn't run that. Same with Psychic Fangs. If it runs Psychic Fangs, it's another Psychic type move that can destroy screens. And of course, Rock Slide is on there as well, covering the Rock type move that if it doesn't have Stone Edge, it might have Rock Slide. I don't think they'd do both. Realistically, it's probably gonna have Stone Edge. They normally go for those bigger high damage moves as opposed to ones with optional effects like Rock Slide, with that flinch, of course. But yeah, he's got quite a few moves that he could run. Not all our builds work with all the available moves because this is such a diverse move set that this Pokemon or move pool that this Pokemon has. So I kind of built for a bunch of different move sets. Some of them will work better than others for sure. And we'll get there when we start talking about our builds. Metagross can have two abilities. Clear Body, which is almost for sure the ability it's going to be running. Clear Body makes it so you can't lower its stats, which I kept in mind while building these Pokemon. None of them, as long as I remembered to do that, I'm pretty sure I did. None of them have any stat lowering moves. It's all about boosting you and your team to get around that Clear Body issue. Light Metal is Metagross's other option for an ability that just halves its weight, which isn't super useful. They're definitely not going to run that. I'm really banking on them not actually because a couple of our builds actually hope Metagross has a pretty high weight, believe it or not. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be running Clear Bottle. As a pure Steel type, Metagross is going to be weak to the ground, fire, and fighting moves. We're going to be dishing out against it, all of which it has some sort of option to counter, which is kind of funny. So we had to be a little bit choosy with which Pokemon we chose. So some of them, again, will work better than others. We'll get to that when we get to our builds. Metagross, of course, is going to be in raids from May 8th to May 11th, and then once again from May 16th to May 18th. So you get 2 weekends there as normal, spread apart by a week. So you get an opportunity to build one of these builds. If you can't defeat it the first week, course correct, see what it had, see what builds work best against what it had, and build one of those again for the next week. So that being said, let's get into our builds. Let me pull up my little notepad here of all their actual perfect stat spreads and everything. Our first one here we've got is King Gambit. So this Pokemon will not work very well if Metagross has access to Brick Break, especially. Body Press is a great option against this Pokemon, and Earthquake. If it has any of those three moves, this one will work a little less well. If it has one of the two fighting type moves, I wouldn't even bother with King Gambit. He'd just go down so fast. Of course, King Gambit is a Dark Steel Pokemon. It's going to be Terra Fighting, and you'll see why that is in just a second. We're going to give the Shell Ball held at him. This Pokemon has a very, very high attack stat and a pretty good defense as well, which is kind of why I thought it'd work here. So hopefully, Metagross doesn't have those fighting moves. If it does, we're going to be in for some real trouble. I give this Pokemon Defiant. It's its only ability that really does anything here. A lot of the abilities on these builds that I have for you today actually don't do like anything, but not really a way to do that. I needed to use the Pokemon species, so... But of course, Low Kick is going to be our main damage output, as you can see up there. Low Kick has a variable base power based on the target's weight, and Metagross's weight is high enough to where you get the maximum. I believe it's 120 base power. With an 100% accuracy move is great. It's fantastic. And a decent amount of Pokemon get Low Kick actually, which is worth mentioning. King Gambit also, once it terrestrializes to fighting type, is going to be dealing a whole lot of damage with those low kicks and that very high attack stat. You might get a Defiant boost too. If Metagross goes for some random move that lowers your stat, whatever that may be, it'd be very nice to get the Defiant boost +2 to attack will mean your low kicks are doing a lot of damage. In case this is a setup Metagross, you've got Taunt on there. Use that Taunt, it won't be able to use any of its moves. I think it gets like Hone Claws and stuff like that. If you use Taunt, it won't be able to use that. Thunder Wave is a great option to maybe make it so Metagross can't hit as often. You know, those paralysis turns where it gets fully paralyzed can be very, very useful in a difficult raid. And we've got Iron Defense. I'd recommend leading probably with an Iron Defense or two. But again, if Metagross has a fighting move, either Brick Break, Body Press, or anything like that, King Gambit's not going to work. I wouldn't even bother. When it comes to its EVs, you're going to want to put, this is a little bit of a weird spread, you're going to want to put 252 points into HP, 152 into attack, and 104 in defense. That gives this Pokemon a little bit of extra staying power, which it definitely needs against such a physically offensive Pokemon. Defiant, again, is its ability. When it comes to IVs, everything matters except your special attack stat, so keep that in mind. Moving on to our next Pokemon, we've got Palo Sand, a very interesting Pokemon. And again, this is one of the examples where its ability doesn't really do anything. So that, you know, I think there's like 2 or 3 of those on this actually. Palo Sand, of course, is a Ghost and Ground Pokemon. You're going to be Terra type of Ground. Give it the Leftovers Held item. Palo Sand will work a little less well if Metagross has Shadow Claw or Ice Punch. Neither of those will hit this Pokemon super hard like the fighting moves on King Gambit, but they can still deal super effective damage, so keep that in mind if you're planning on building this Pokemon. Terra type of Ground, I think I mentioned that, and give it the Held item of Leftovers so it can stick around a little bit longer. Iron Defense is going to be this Pokemon's a way to build up physical defense so it can take more and more hits. And then I've also got a very, very good move on this Pokemon with Scorching Sand. It's worth noting, by the way, Metagross has actually a pretty decently lower special defense than it does a physical defense. So some of these options still target that physical stat just because the Pokemon was good enough to where I couldn't ignore that. But a lot of them, if I could, I tried to hit specially. And Scorching Sand is an example of that. You're hitting with a ground type move with 70 base power, which isn't super high, but you're hitting that special defense, so it kind of makes up for that ground. And it has the chance to burn, which is very, very useful. If you can burn this Metagross and keep it burned, that's going to be huge. I've also got Hypnosis on here, not because you necessarily need to use it, but because there wasn't a 4th move for this Pokemon, and I thought, you know, there may be some weird niche case where you want to lead with a Hypnosis, then go for an Iron Defense or 2, just to give yourself a couple extra setup turns. You probably don't use it. I needed a 4th move to put on this Pokemon, and there it was. Shore Up is this Pokemon's healing option. If you use Shore Up, you'll get a decent amount of your HP back. If it's in Sandstorm, you get more, but I didn't want to run Sand because Sand probably just benefits Metagross. It won't be taking damage and your team will, so that's not a great choice, which is why this Pokemon doesn't have Sandstorm instead of Hypnosis. You could potentially run that, but I'd coordinate with your team if you're going to. Be like, hey, I'm setting Sand. We need to all play around that or play into that. And if you do, you can change Water Compaction, this Pokemon's ability for Sandvale, which is its hidden ability, so you're going to have to use an ability patch for that. But then it'll be worth something, as opposed to Water Compaction, which literally does nothing. But again, Sand, I don't know if it's worth the commitment. So maybe stay away from that, just throw Hypnosis. Or if you can think of something better, go ahead and be my guest. When it comes to its EVs, you want to put 252 points into HP, 148 into defense, and then 108 into special attack. This Pokemon is going to be Modest Nature. I completely forgot to mention, by the way, King Gambit is Adamant. Completely forgot to mention that. My bad. Ooh, I'm going to the next Pokemon. My bad. King Gambit is Adamant, and which is plus attack minus special attack. Palo Sand is going to be Modest, which is plus special attack minus attacks. They just flip flop. When it comes to IVs, everything matters except this Pokemon's attack stat. And again, its ability is Water Compaction. That doesn't really matter. If you get one with Sandbell, that'll work just fine because you're probably not being hit by a water move anyway. I believe that's all for this Pokemon. Yep. Okay, moving on to our next one. We've got Lapras here. Lapras is a purely support defensive build, so keep that in mind. This Pokemon will not solo you this raid by any means. I've got one Pokemon here that might be able to solo the Metagross, but even that's going to be tough. Metagross is a very, very powerful Pokemon. I think soloing it's going to be a little too difficult. So definitely be ready for a team battle. But Lapras, of course, is a water ice type Pokemon. Give me the Terra type of Ground, and it's going to hold the Light Clay Held item. Lapras will work slightly less well if it has Thunder Punch, but it should still be okay. Lapras is a pretty high defensive stat. Even though it's taking super effective damage, Thunder Punch only has I think it's like a 60 base power, which isn't a whole lot, but off of Metagross, it's still going to be hitting decently, so just keep that in mind. Give it the Light Clay Held item, and you'll see why immediately we've got Reflect there. So, one thing very worth mentioning. If this Metagross has Psychic Fangs or Brick Break, don't use this Lapras. It completely defeats the point of what this Lapras does. It won't be able to set Reflect, which is what this Lapras is really focused on doing. You've got Haze on there too, in case the Metagross sets up Hone Claws or some other setup move. You can press Haze, clear that stat change, not have to worry about it, you or your team, which would be very useful. You've got Life Dew, a very good option on Lapras to heal you and your team if you run out of cheers or want to save your cheers for some offensive cheers. And then we've got Terra Blast as this Pokemon's main damage output. Again, this Pokemon isn't really focused on damage, but once you get to Terra, you'll be doing super effective damage with that ground. That ground Terra Blast. Again, I wouldn't really focus on that. This Pokemon is definitely a defensive build, a defensive support build, I should say. When it comes to its EVs, very simple build here. Got 252 in HP, 252 in defense, with the last 4 into special attack, just because it's going to be using a little bit of special attack with those Terra Blasts. Shell Armor is this Pokemon's only applicable ability here, so just run that. You don't want to be getting critical hit. Shell Armor makes that so it doesn't happen, which is very nice. When it comes to its nature, this Pokemon has Bold, which is plus defense, minus attack, and when it comes to its IVs, everything matters except its attack stat. Moving on to our next Pokemon, here is the most fun one, I'll say. This is probably the one I'm going to be primarily using. We've got Corvanite here. Corvanite will work, again, a little less well if Metagross has Thunder Punch, but it should still be fine because Corviknight has such a high defensive stat. It's got Flying and Steel as its primary typing, and then its Terra type is going to be Fighting. Helldive is going to be Shell Bell, you know, the usual. And then I believe when I pulled this Corviknight out of my box, it already had this moveset. So I guess this is just such a great build that I've used it before, which is kind of funny to think about. Reflect again. Same type of thing as Lapras. If it's running Brick Break, don't even bother. There's not really a reason to. It'll probably just immediately clear it. But you've got Iron Defense and Body Press as your main damage output. You set up a few Iron Defenses, you're not going to be taking any damage. And then go for Body Press. It's going to be dealing super effective damage, plus the boost from Iron Defense. Roost is your way of healing in case you need to for whatever reason. So you got your Cheers, which probably are better because they heal you and your team. But if you run out of those, you can press a Roost here or there. Mirror Armor is the only ability that I think does anything on this Pokemon. It's really interesting because if it's running Clear Body, it shouldn't matter. Like, I don't know how that interaction works, I should say. I probably should have looked into that a little bit more. But you can't drop its stats, but if it tries to drop yours and it gets bounced back with Mirror Armor, I don't think it'll lower it, but none of the other abilities, I know none of the other abilities really do anything in these raids, so I was like, okay, Mirror Armor might do something. So might as well run that ability because there's the chance it could do something, but it still probably doesn't. But so realistically, if you got a Corviknight with any ability, just run it. It doesn't matter too much. You've got, I think I mentioned all of its moves. Yeah. Mirror Armor. Yep. Okay. When it comes to its EVs, you want to max out HP. So that's 252 points. Do the same with defense, but 252 into that. But the last 4 in special defense, just because there's not really anything else you need to worry about on this Pokemon. When it comes to nature, it's going to be minus special attack up defense, which I believe is impish. Yes. And when it comes to IVs, everything matters except your special attack, and I don't think your attack matters either because Body Press is going to be using your defensive stat, so keep that in mind. Again, this Pokemon is going to be Terra Fighting, so once you get to that Terra, keep in mind, if you Terra to Fighting, you're going to be taking super effective psychic damage. So you need to kind of play into that, and only Terra if you know you can take a hit well, like you've got a couple Iron Defense set up, maybe you have a Reflect set up, and your team is defensive cheer. If you can afford to take a little bit extra damage in order to deal more damage, press that Terra button, but just keep in mind that that's kind of a risky move. Moving on to our next Pokemon, we've got Glade here. Glade, fun Pokemon. When I saw an opportunity for Glade, I immediately took it. Glade is a really cool Pokemon. One of my favorites as a kid, and might as well try to use him here. Psychic and Fighting is Glade's primary typing. Give it the Terra type of Fighting, which is going to be a little bit hard to get because unless you catch a wild Glade, it has no chance of doing that, so just keep that in mind. And give it the Shell Bell. Hold at him. When it comes to its move, Sacred Sword is its main damage output, which ignores target stat changes, which could be pretty useful in case this Metagross sets up a Iron Defense or 2. You've got Taunt to stop it from setting up those Iron Defenses if you can get to it before it does. Will-O-Wisp is a great move on this Pokemon. If you can burn that Metagross, that's going to really nerf its damage output and help you and your team. Reflect does the same, again, only if it doesn't have Psychic Things or Brick Breaks. Keep that in mind. Sharpness is going to be this Pokemon's ability, which will power up your Sacred Sword damage. When it comes to its EVs, you want to put 252 points in HP, 104 into attack, and 152 in defense. You need to really focus on defense because Glade's not a super bulky Pokemon, as you can see with that stat spread. It has a little bit in special defense, but not a whole lot in defense, which is what Metagross is going to be hitting. When it comes to its nature, it's going to be Adamant, which is plus attack minus special attack. And when it comes to its IVs, everything matters except its special attack stat. Moving on to our last Pokemon here, I feel like I'm out of breath. We've got Iron Treads. Obviously, this Pokemon's only going to work if you are playing Violet or you have a friend that is and is willing to trade you an Iron Treads. Either way, Iron Treads works okay here. And Metagross has a ground type move, like Earthquake. Metagross will work, or not Metagross. Iron Treads will work a little less well, but it still should be okay. And if you can get to the Terra, you kind of lose that, and then you have to start worrying about Ice Punches, but don't worry too much about that. Iron Treads is going to be the Ground and Steel type, Terra type Ground, and give it the Shell Bell. Hold at him. When it comes to its moves, Iron Defense and Body Press again. you know how it works. I just explained it all with Corvanite. You press a few iron defenses, your body press is going to start doing a lot of damage. But if it clears your stat changes and you don't want to bother setting it up again for whatever reason, I've got Earthquake on here too, just in case, you know, in case you don't want to Terra or whatever, which I think actually I want Terra Fighting on this. Yes, I do. My bad. I do want Terra Fighting on Iron Treads. So you know what? We'll go change that right now. You want Terra Fighting on Iron Treads. Keep that in mind. You guys get a little bit of a look into my save file here in the middle of shiny hunting, as you can probably tell with my party. But you're gonna want Terra Fighting on Iron Treads so that once you Terrasilize, those body presses can start dealing a lot of damage. Having Terra Ground is actually an also okay option now that I think about it, because then you won't pick up that psychic super effectiveness, which you've got to kind of worry about. This Pokemon is going to be, when it comes to its EVs, put 252 points in HP, 180 into attack, 76 into defense, so this Pokemon can take a little bit of extra hits. It's got a pretty decent defensive stat, just basically, so you don't really have to worry about it too much there, but that's why we put a lot more into offense here. It's going to be Adamant Nature, which is plus attack and minus special attack. It's cool you guys get to walk with me to the, this is where you change Terra type, in case you didn't know. Wrong button. I think we want Fighting, which I should have enough shards for. Yep, there we go. And then we can feed it to our Iron Treads over here. There we go. Yep, perfect. Okay, and now this Iron Treads is what you want for the build. I apologize for that. Its ability is going to be Quark Drive. That's the only ability it can get, which plays really well into its fourth move, as you can see right here, which is Electric Train. Yeah, so those are the EVs. I mentioned the number, but if you want to compare it chart-wise, that it is. There it is. Quark Drive is Pokemon's only ability, which plays into its Electric Train. If you and your team are all using Iron Treads, press Electric Train. It gives you all a boost to your highest stat, which in this case is your attack stat. That'll be super useful. I'm pressing those Earthquakes specifically. If you're pressing Body Presses, if you're at that point in the match, don't worry about Electric Train because it's going to give you an attack boost and Body Press to use your defense anyway. But if you've got Electric Train, Earthquake might be dealing a lot of damage unless you start with like 3 iron defenses, and then your body press is going to be dealing a lot, and you'll be taking less damage. So realistically, I'd focus on the body presses, keep that Earthquake in the background in case you need a little bit of extra damage right at the end. You don't want to have to worry about setting up. And when it comes to its IVs, I don't think I mentioned those. Everything matters on this Pokemon except its special attack stat. So a little bit of a disorganized-ish video here. I apologize for that if it seemed like I was a little bit out of breath or whatever. I'm recording in a place that I'm not normally recording in. I'm actually on break, so I'm not at my dorm currently. And I kind of this caught me off guard. I'm gonna be honest. I had to build these Pokemon. I was a little bit busy otherwise, spending time with my family and everything. But here you go. Here's your 6 Pokemon that you can run. I'm probably going to be running Corvanite. It's probably the most fun one. I definitely recommend this Pokemon. It's probably the most sound. I could almost guarantee if you build the Corvanite, it'll work. So keep that in mind when you're building. With that being said, those are all our builds here. Thank you guys so much for watching this 7-star Terra Raid build video. Again, I apologize if it seemed a little bit more disorganized. It was. I was a little busy. This, again, caught me off guard. But I appreciate you guys watching to the end of this. Build one of these Pokemon, especially Corviknight, if you want to make sure you can get that Metagross when it comes out pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. One of my favorite Pokemon. I know you guys are too. And again, thank you for watching. Hope to see you guys out there in this Terra Raid dance, and have a good day.